Hello everyone, thank you for SCA recommending A5 for safety presentation. We'll start off with risk management, and that is no physical injuries, no incident. And the reason for the seemingly achievable goal is that we feel that except other number of accidents, injuries, or incidents would be to say that a certain number of these things are okay, and that a member, a staff member, is involved in any of these incidents, and they're doing their SCA experience, we're okay with it, and we're not. That's the reason for the goal. Second context here, there are defined the probability of loss or peril. Hazards, such are obvious, like this example here. In work out in the field, we use categorize hazards, and we define them in broad categories: environmental hazards, human hazards, and tools, equipment, hazards. So examples of environmental hazards are weather, flora, fauna, animals, respiratory chain, natural disasters, temperature gains, trees, air quality, visibility, rocks, biohazards, litter, cold and hot water, and allergens. Take a minute now to think of other environmental hazards that either you experience past in or things that you can anticipate that we have listed here that you might encounter with us. For all humans that are present in work like to a schedule, television, peer pressure, or situations, meaning poor communication, supervision, confident action, leadership. Same as before, think of other can happen. There are tools, vehicles, and other things like trade. Stove, lack of or kitchen knife. This was certainly not other tool, vehicles, and other things. We have been looking at the different hazards, how they relate to one another, and things in their going. So rough thought hazard. When hazard categories are out separately, they involve some kind of amount. However, when you combine these hazards, risk is elevated more than you have to have. So in this example, you have a raining, the steep side, and mental hazard, and human hazard, that is exhausted and hungry. Those two separate are some amount of street hazard, but together where you have right here. Similarly, if you find a human hazard with a tool hazard such as a dog and you have an increased amount of risk in the center area where they overlap. Finally, you have all three types of hazards area where the three circles right here is where you have created stages. Protocol you have to separate the others. So, for example, we'll have a protocol on a tool so that the effective use for a rule will be and have this safety guideline similarly help big experience. Just give you some idea on things to do, minimize accidents in the field, whether that's making long sleep to avoid getting mosquitoes or wearing heavy boots, you're going to be leaning around person protect way. Being there, so that was definitely lead around anyone who's swimming is great to plan for a weather, so we'll do that in our rate. Good hydration, eating habits, communicating with the crew, so developing emergency response plan, have available things. Things you can mitigate risk. Mitigation is one of those things every crew have purpose time, and the presentation is easy to not think of, but it's critical in terms of health. As a thing that you'll do when you get started and start working as and you're looking at you identifying the probability of the victim or probability plus variable risk. Look at what you do, the probability and or severity and decide whether ride by the city. Hazard that would have as riding bike in city traffic. So the probability by car, depending on what you're riding in, medium. However, the severity of being by is high. So you're looking at mitigation, you're going to be looking at what we do to reduce probability and or severity of encountering traffic. So the things you can do are helmet to reduce the system. So it doesn't do anything to reduce the probability but it will reduce the idea of the severity in the that you get an act. Waivers would be probably eliminating or route. So there are cars on the road flood and accident. And another way there's probability is to identify hazards and their associated probability of the thought process is something you do all the time and CA. We are just looking for you to be you've done that identification of hazards. Just try whether the risk is in line with whether it's or getting outside a lot of bike racing or SCAs. That was an SCA's tool for identifying and mitigating what's called Take-5 safe. It's a way for you to set home the crew, get in the habit of doing this every day work. You can use it to teach your crew members about management, interactive, and empowers anyone in the crew thinking. We really acknowledge that you're in work or about to go on a trip, whatever it is, and acknowledge that it's something that you do. The next step is think observe. Think what everything could be involved in whatever you're about to do. Stuff that's a good idea or bad idea. First step is identifying hazard and assess. And so this is where you're going to be identifying environmental human equipment hazard that may contribute to an incident. Assess the risk or the probability and the variable. So for each hazard, identify the probability. Use this measure to help you. You'll look at is the probability of encountering the hazard low, medium, high. Once you identify the probability, identify the severity. Same thing. Is the variable of encountering the hazard low, medium, high. Once you've done that, and determine whether the sensitivity is consistent, whether my fall into any or thing. Before that, plan conduct. So this is where you're going to be talking to the crew and saying how do you identify and plan ways to mitigate the probability or the variety of thing might we did this training where the emergency response kit making devices and personal protection and manage to continue to monitor the activity of the risk in the field and to identify more hazards have to change together into big five. Do we take whenever you interrupt significant change environment role work site or anytime there's a significant increase? There's so much free time in